Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
Jaime and Fuego here.
And we're back for another edition of Horror Comics Reviews, you guys. And today we're going to be doing a little bit of a different thing. We're still going to be presenting two different books, but the second book we're going to be presenting is a little bit different. Fuego, first off, real quick, let's tell them what each book is.
And dude, you know I'm super stoked about the book that I'm going to be featuring today, Aliens Book 1 of the Dark Horse Comics. And what do you have?
And what I've got is an independent horror comic called Dark Moon that was actually sent to us from someone that had watched the show. So we'll get into all that when it's my turn, but first off, let's talk about Aliens and tell them why we're talking about it.
Yes, please, because this is a ginormous year for the franchise as a whole, because they're celebrating their 30th anniversary, 3 decades since my favorite movie of all time. Like, if you were to ask me, horror, sci-fi, whatever it may be, tops is James Cameron's second Alien film. And the cool thing that this book does is it is a direct continuation. Before David Fincher came in and retconned everything and decided to start killing people, this book actually continues the story of Newt and Hicks and what happened afterwards. We don't see Ripley, at least yet, but yeah, the 20th Century Fox is doing tons of celebration, most notably on the 26th of April, LV 426. You guys get where they're going with that? Yeah. So they are releasing a new Audible book. They have a brand new comic coming out called Aliens Defiance, which is going to be an ongoing 12-issue series. They're doing a hardcover deluxe re-release of this one. And this book has had a really strange history because of the fact that it was originally published in 1990, a couple years after the Cameron film. And so they were trying to continue on the story, but after Alien 3, as I mentioned, retconned everything, they ended up re-releasing the book, coloring it because it's in black and white in this particular original incarnation, but they changed the names of characters. Newt and Hicks were out since they died in Alien 3. They retitled the characters so that they could keep the stories and continue releasing them and still just kind of let it fit into the ongoing universe. But for me, I love this story. It's essentially 10 years after, and what state of mind would Newt and Hicks be in? So Newt is institutionalized. She's messed up. She's haunted by the nightmares of
No longer a little girl.
No longer a little girl. Yeah, exactly. 10 years later. So she's still a minor, but she's like in her late teens and stuff. She's grown into nearly being a woman, but she is still so scarred that the parents, all of her friends, she was the only survivor of LV 426 when all those Marines came. And so Hicks, he has been ostracized by all of his fellow Marines. He's been disfigured. Everybody is like, you had that poison all over you. They're wondering if he's contagious. And so he was quarantined for a great long period of time. And then he's drunk, he's disorderly. He obviously is dealing with his demons differently than her.
Right.
And so, interestingly enough, though, the government still wants an alien. The government still wants to weaponize the alien, but then there's private companies like the corporation that are getting involved. We also see the first appearance of people worshiping the alien almost as like a messiah or a god of some sort. And so these are all seeds that they sow and expand upon further in later stories in the expanded universe. But Mark Verheiden, I gotta say, man, he worked on Heroes, he worked on Man of Steel, did lots of Dark Horse stuff as well. He did the first Predator book after the Schwarzenegger movie. So he had lots of experience with these properties, and boy, is he world building here, isn't he, man? Because you read this too.
Yes, absolutely. I did read this because I love the second Aliens movie as well. It's one of my all-time favorite action movies. And quite honestly, as big of a horror fan and comic book fan as you can see behind us, as I am, I have never actually dipped my toe into the Aliens or Predator comic book universe. I think I might have one Aliens versus Predator war trade somewhere.
Which was like the second or third story after the solo stories first.
So I was actually very interested to read the book anyway, but as many times as Fuego must have told me that it was Newt and Hicks' story, it didn't actually probably register until, in one ear and out the other, until I actually picked up the book and started reading it, and I was like, oh, like, because the first time we see Newt, she and some friends are telling stories.
Those stories.
And they each, her friends tell little stories, and they're like, now Newt, tell us your story. Tell us your monster story,
And it's something lame about witches or something. They're like, no, we know you have something scarier in mind.
Yeah, exactly. So that was really cool. I'm like, oh, damn, this is really, like, right after the movie, 10 years after or whatever, but I was like, okay, cool, I'm in, I'm really in. So I kind of burned through the book. Now,
despite being a dense read, as you told me.
It was, but there were so many things within the book and the story that they portrayed, besides just the simple, or what I think is the more basic elements of an alien story with, the government trying to procure an alien, people unwittingly being drawn into the situation, usually Ripley. In this situation, it's actually Hicks being unwittingly drawn in, but
he wants some revenge.
Newt
man,
wants
you know?
to be going.
Yeah.
She wants to go, so she wants another crack at everything. So,
well, first and foremost, she wants to escape from the asylum because they're talking about taking out lasering her brain, and they've been giving her all of this medicine, and there's worry about brain damage, and that's because she's still haunted by nightmares to this day, a decade later.
right. So that's interesting stuff. But the more interesting stuff for me was the things that we haven't gotten in the Aliens movies. Specifically, there were a couple things from a couple different Alien movies, and I'm going to let Fuego talk about the engineer, but I want to speak about the architecture of the alien habitats that we've seen in the movies. We've seen them, especially in Aliens, when you can see the corridors start off as the human-built corridors, right? When the Marines are going in to figure out what happened.
But remember, as they get deeper in, it looks more organic.
Exactly, and it starts to look sort of like the biology of the aliens. It's like got the black tube-ish sort of look and things like that. And I've always been like, why is that? You know, why does the architecture look like the aliens themselves? And that's like the coolest thing in this book, in my opinion, was that backstory in one of the early issues of the book, where the aliens are essentially a hive of bees, really. They protect the queen. Yeah. They're all drones, and drones are easily sacrificed. So when the aliens are in a situation like a harsh planet where they're trying to build themselves a shelter, what do they use? The materials at hand, which is the drones. Yeah, so they rip each other apart and use themselves to build the architecture of the alien structures. That one point alone made this like a completely worthwhile and necessary read. And again, as you said, this is the black and white version.
Yeah, which is how it was originally released.
Right, and I haven't seen the color version. Yeah. I actually ordered the Aliens Omnibus. It should be here tomorrow, so I'm going to be able to...
Yeah, and with the different names in that
That's
one,
what's
too.
weird. That's what's going to be really weird, because did they change the name in the second story, too?
Oh, yeah, because they have to carry it all over through Earth War, which is the third one. So they basically...
So weird.
They retcon Ripley, they retcon Newt and Hicks, which is a big disappointment for me.
So I'm going to have to pretty much go back and get these particular trades as well
to
get the real story.
The old-looking original, because the second release of this has a beautiful painted cover, but this one is still pretty dope, I gotta say.
So anyway, we don't want to give too much of the story away, and the review will go on forever if we do, frankly.
Indeed, and we've had them go on forever, our first Dark Tower.
Exactly. So let's move on and talk about the artwork itself. Yeah. Okay, so what did you think of it? You had to sort of breeze back through it because it had been a number of years since you looked at it, right?
Yeah, and something that you mentioned to me is that, just to briefly focus once more on the storytelling, is that a lot of the ideas were way bigger than my young adolescent mind could realize. You know, everything from, there's commentary about commercialism and about, I mean, they have these television devices religion, that are obviously big time on the religion with the whole cult aspect. And so yeah, it's some heady themes that I think maybe they went for the younger denominator in later incarnations, but for this one, it was that, you know, late 80s era where stuff like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns was coming out, and people were actually saying big adult stuff in comic books. And this comic is not only dark in themes, but in the visuals as well. Right. It's violent, and there is one particular kill that, as I was rereading this, I'd forgotten all about it. There's a chest burster coming out of this guy who's been taken on, and he's back on Earth. So just, I guess that's a minor spoiler. The aliens get to Earth in this particular book.
That was a big thing too, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so as he is about to burst out of the chest of this this poor guy who was like salvaging a ship or something for the company, well, a doctor gets a little bit too close, gets pulled in, and when the chest burster comes out, it goes through the doctor too. And I was like, that is dope as far as kills go. And so that's really a theme throughout this. This book is not for kids, just like the R-rated movies were not for kids, even if they were making toys and stuff. And Fox had ulterior motives, obviously. But
I mean, I think a 13-year-old could read it and be okay. My 13-year-old mind wouldn't have been that warped because, you know, I was watching horror movies at the time, and I turned out just fine. I didn't create a horror show or anything like that.
No, we're not sitting here talking about the spooktacular. But, I mean, I was surprised, especially with reading some of the later stories where they get more silly and childish. This really kept the tone of those first two films very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I agree. The artwork I thought was phenomenal. It was a little sort of, I thought, cramped, and again, because of the denseness of the writing, the art was pretty dense. You said Watchmen. It's you know, it's dense like that at a lot of points. There's a couple of big alien splashes.
Yeah, we're talking like bits from you know, like
diaries,
like
audio
diaries
logs.
and reports, because we learned so much about the genetics and the life cycle of the alien through this. That's more the world building I was talking about, expanding on the mythology of the character. And I mean, everything from learning that, oh, it can survive in zero gravity. It can just jump from the outside of ships and stuff. And I mean, it's just, it is a frightening parasite. Yeah, it's black and white, so it's a little on the darker side, but I still thought very effective with sad, morbid tone of a lot of what's going down.
Absolutely.
There's not a lot of happiness in this book.
Absolutely. And well worth your time, you guys. So check it out if you get a chance. That's Aliens Book 1.
Yeah, and the last thing I got to say is it's fascinating in the fact that despite the aliens being these like frightening killing creatures and stuff like that in this, the real villains in this book are the people.
Yep.
So yeah, at the end of the day, humanity ends up being the real villains of this story, and they kind of get what they deserve in the end of it. So this is a good segue into the book that Cecil covered, Dark Moon, because it's very obviously inspired by aliens, at least in my opinion.
Absolutely. The book was definitely inspired by that and other spacefaring alien movies, because at this point there have been so many that to pinpoint it just to aliens might not necessarily be entirely accurate, but
that's
who
just
knows?
Me being a big alien fan, so, sorry.
So what happened was, about a year ago, one of the people that was following us on Twitter reached out to us saying, hey, we made an independent horror comic book, and we were wondering if we could send you some materials about it, and it's a motion comic. Can we forward you the link? And I said, sure. They said, we have the link to issue number 2. I said, okay, cool. Is there any chance you guys have issue number 1? Because as a comic, enthusiast and
like physical things.
Completionist, I like to have the full story at the least. So I was like, is there an issue 1 or anything like that that we can maybe show on the show when we get around to reviewing it? And they said, sure. So they actually sent us a little care package, which was the comic itself, a little sort of informational card about it with some cool artwork on the back, a cool little sticker, an Alien Dark Moon sticker, and another one as well. And the really neat thing that they actually included was apparently part of the people involved are musicians, because they sent a CD that actually was a sort of a soundtrack for reading the comic book.
Remember these things, guys? CDs?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Something physical with music on it?
It's crazy when you actually find these things. But it was a really neat accompaniment to the comic book. So what I did was I went ahead and before reading the motion comic, I wanted to read the actual hard copy. And by the time we actually got around to doing it, the 3rd issue had come out in a motion comic form, and we'll put a link to it afterwards so you guys can all get your hands on it. But I wanted to check out the old school hard copy, so I did. And I must say, the visuals were really, really cool.
One of the best parts of it, because I read it too.
Yeah, exactly. And the story itself was interesting. It was an intriguing setup, and it's something that I am interested to read more about. The dialogue itself was a little bit hammy. That's a bit of a problem, but it's not so huge that it ruins the comic. It doesn't break it, and I think that as they go on, it'll sort of iron itself out, because it's mostly visuals. It's very light on the dialogue.
Yeah.
And when I read the comic, I thought the visuals were really cool, but unfortunately, it was super dark.
Yeah.
It printed up really, really dark, you guys. So it's kind of tough to read at parts. Can't really see what's going on. And
it's not just a comic problem. We saw it in so many short horror films we viewed recently at the Phoenix Film Festival. So making things too dark, be careful, guys.
Yeah, exactly. But that happens, I hear, with printing sometimes.
Yeah.
I've never made my own comic, but I did hear that that's been a problem. So I actually went on. I was like, okay, well, that's issue 1. I'm going to keep going because there's 3 issues out. I want to give it a fair shake, just like I do with the other comics we review. So I moved over to the motion comic, and I saw that issue 1 was up as a motion comic as well, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll give that a try too. So what I did in turn was watch all 3 issues of the motion comic. And here's what was really, really cool. This is where Dark Moon shines, you guys.
Yeah.
I guess you should give the basic story. The basic story is something is happening on Earth. There's an impending doom, I believe an asteroid. A physicist is able to gather up sort of the 8 closest people to him, and he's built this prototype dimension hopper kind of thing, or is a teleporter, right? Teleportation device.
Yeah.
And what's happened is, in this world, there is sort of an alternate moon that Earth scientists were trying to figure out a way to colonize because it had some kind of ability in the atmosphere where we could build something easier, something like that. They still need suits to survive,
Yeah.
but
they're like testing the surroundings to see how livable it might be. And
there you go. That's a good way of putting it. Yes. So, but as the asteroid's approaching, they don't have any time to finish their tests or anything. He just gathers up the 8 nearest people or so. They all get in these suits that he has readily available. There's some elements of convenience in the book.
There are.
But they get in the teleporter and they transport to Dark Moon, and then unfortunately the physicist reveals that they don't really have a way back. Yep. So they have to just basically walk on the Dark Moon and try and find something, civilization, life, some kind of structure, some way to help themselves because they have limited oxygen.
Yeah, and they kind of find all of the above.
Exactly. Yeah. So getting back to the motion comic aspect, because that's the story that we've gotten in the first 3 issues, essentially. The motion comic, the atmospheric sounds are so cool considering the Dark Moon atmosphere and the creatures that they run afoul of. They're these massive red creatures that do not like these humans trespassing on their Dark Moon.
Chomp.
Exactly. But I must say, the dialogue is less noticeably hammy when people are delivering it, I thought.
I still laughed out loud from time to time, but it's so forgivable in the fact that it's like a bad horror movie that is so bad it's good because it's so gruesome and so visually cool. I mean, I've seen my fair share, and the negative things with some of the storytelling being cliched and some of the dialogue totally, just overshadowed by the awesomeness of the visuals and how they made it a fully immersive experience with the sounds and the stuff you were describing. Yeah. They put it on a whole nother level, a whole new world.
Well, and there's motion in the panels too. It's not just presenting the panels, like, characters will move, things will change on the screen. There'll be shimmering light effects that I thought were really cool. And in fact, there was one moment in particular where there was a dark corridor that a character was looking down, and an alien peeks around the corner and rushes. It moves. And it doesn't like move, but different drawings. It does the different sequential drawings as the creature's coming at the person, and it was effective. I was like, that's really
almost
cool.
Like borderline animation at that rate.
Right. So the motion comic, you guys, is definitely worth checking out. I
definitely.
mean, it's the first one I've really seen, honestly. I know Marvel has motion comics on Netflix and stuff, but I haven't watched any of them. I don't know if they go this in depth or anything like that. But for my first experience, and my first experience not only with a motion comic but with a horror comic, it was a successful one, I believe.
Indeed. So these were actually 2 fun ones that, as you could tell, kind of had some commonality, which is why we wanted to review them together. But just to get back to Alien, they are doing a 4/26 festivities for the 30th anniversary of the film, as we mentioned, and we are actually going to be doing some coverage here for the show as well, from ongoing Aliens comics coverage. We're going to jump from book to book. We're going to see that Earth War we described in the 3rd volume, and we're going to go even beyond that. So that's going to be fun ongoing coverage as we approach the July official 30th anniversary of the film.
Right.
We're also going to look back at those films at some point too in the future.
Absolutely. So stay tuned for all of that, guys. We're going to be doing a lot of Alien coverage in the next year. And also, before we go, I did want to mention that you can actually get your copy of Dark Moon at darkmooncomic.com. You guys go check them out. That's going to be the best place for you to go and experience it for yourself.
And it was a pretty cool experience too, right?
Absolutely.
Very worthwhile.
So thanks again for watching, you guys. We hope you liked this episode of the Horror Comics Review. Let us know down below if you've read these books, or if you're into reading these books and you want to check it out. We appreciate you guys sticking with us here, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. I've been Cecil Laird.
Gracias, Jaime Fuego.
And until next time, remember,
stay scared.